Welcome to this video, which is going to demonstrate the implementation of the useEffect hook. The useEffect hook is used to implement effects or trigger hooks as a side effect in components and functions. The useEffect hook can be triggered under various conditions. For instance, a useEffect hook could be triggered on the loading of a component. A useEffect hook can be triggered when the state of an element of data changes. A useEffect hook can be triggered whenever anything in the component changes. As such, useEffect hooks should be implemented with care because they are very powerful and allow React components additional functionality. In this example, we will be looking at the use of the useEffect hook on the loading of a component to get data down from an API. To start off with, we shall be creating our first a new React application. I shall open up the app in Visual Studio Code. Opening up Test App 3.3 and opening up app.js. You can also open up the terminal and type in the following npm start. The development server starts up, and we can see that Chrome over here is going to be loading the React application, which is going to be the splitting logo. We can also open up the developer console, so we can see any results down here that we might be interested in as we console log out from app.js. A few things I want to do first. I want to make sure that, I want to make sure that I import React from React. Because the useEffect and useState hooks are part of React library. I can get rid of this image logo. In fact, I can get rid of all of this right here. Now, just to refresh our memory, the API that I'll be using is the Superhero Search API that has that downloads information about 20 random superheroes. Keeping that in mind, the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that I have the right state elements set up so that I can store information about these superheroes. So I'm going to have a const heroes and set heroes. And so obviously, heroes is going to be an array that holds all the hero elements, or it's going to hold all the data that I get from this API. So let us talk a little bit about the useEffect hook. The useEffect hook allows us on component load or on change of state or change of any piece of information about a component to trigger it. The way we invoke the useEffect hook is to say react.useEffect. Within this, we have to specify a function, and we have to specify a dependency. And so I have to specify a function, and in terms of what this function is going to do, as in what is the effect specifically going to be. And I also have to specify what the dependency is. And in this case, the dependency is going to be an empty array. Specifying an empty array over here basically states that this useEffect hook is only going to be run once as this component loads, as this function loads, right? As this function loads, all the details of the component go within the curly braces right here. Now, instead of specifying square an empty array right here, we could specify some other, for instance, state variable, right? That we want to monitor a state variable, and if something about that variable changes, we might want to change something about the component, right? So you can specify a variety of dependencies that trigger the useEffect hook. In this case, I'm only going to be triggering this hook when this app component loads. So when this app component loads, what I want to do is I want to connect to this API. And to connect to this API, I have to specify this URL and these options right here. So I'm just going to straight up copy and paste these elements of the useEffect hook that are going to be important to me. Now, to get data down from the API, I'm going to use the fetch method. I'm going to specify URL and options because they are important to the functioning of the API. And I'm going to say if there is a response from the API, what I want to do with the response is I want to return the JSON version of that response. Once I have the JSON version of the response, then I want to take a look at the data element of that response, and I want to store that data element. I want to take the data element and I want to store the data that I'm getting from the response in heroes, and so I shall be saying set heroes data. Now, if you're wondering whether data is actually coming down properly, I can console data to make sure that we actually have data in here. And as you can see, already we have 20 elements, as this API is supposed to return 20 random superheroes. We can already see that this is working as expected, right? So this component loads up, the app component loads up, although it has nothing in it, right? On the loading of this component, the useEffect hook is triggered. The useEffect hook that gets triggered triggers this API that fetches data from the superhero API. Now, all that's left to do is to render the data that is present in this heroes array. So, one of the things that I can do is I can create a component to display superhero characters. So, I can have a function called display char that is receiving properties, and so it's going to receive properties from the app component. Definitely, one of the things I might want to do is I might want to console log the props that are coming in here. And for instance, one thing I could do is I could render out over here display char equals to heroes, right? In this case, I am passing the entire heroes array, and I'm just gonna comment that out. I'm gonna pass the entire heroes array down to function display char props, right? And you can see, right, char is an array, so char is this array of like 20 different things. If I do props dot char over here, right, I don't see char as an array. I see char as just all of these 20 different things. So, you know, I do get to the display char component all of the heroes. Now, I don't know whether I do want all of the heroes. Maybe I just want display char to display an individual hero's data, right? So instead of displaying all of the data, I want to display an individual hero's data. That means that instead of passing all the heroes, I pass an individual hero at a time. Now, to do that, what I would need to do is I would need to loop through the heroes array that we have that holds all of this data. And so I'm going to say heroes.map. So I'm going to run the map function over a component, and I'm going to implement a function for every character. The function that I'm going to implement for every character is the following. I'm going to return a div, and within this div I have display char, the display char component, and I'm going to send it every character that is being mapped out of the heroes array. I'm going to get rid of this one here. So I'm looping through the heroes, and so I'm running the map function on the heroes array, and then on every individual element, as I am going through the heroes array, I am looking at every character, and I'm running and I'm returning the display character component, where the property char that is coming into the component is the character data. And so if I console log props.char, notice that, you know, all of this is at line 40. It is console logging this data. Now, If I actually wanted to display the information, right, from this component, I'll have a return function, and within that I can have a div, and within the div I can specify a variety of different things. So let's say I start with a horizontal rule. I can have an image tag over here, and in this image tag I can have an src property, and the src property can be props.char dot, taking a look at the specific structure of this, props.char.images. For instance, sm dot images dot sm, right? Allows me to create these characters, and so you can see these images right here, right? If I made it, if I get rid of this horizontal rule, in fact, I think I can get rid of, yeah, there we go. Right? In fact, let's in fact have the horizontal rule right there, so we can actually distinguish between these heroes, and I can specify other pieces of information. For instance, I can have a header, h3, so I can have the name of the character, and if I wanted to, I could use other elements, right? So if I wanted to, I could go through the biography, I could go through appearance, for instance, power stats, right? I have power stats right here, so I could say within span tags, for instance, I could say something like combat, and display props.char.powerstats dot combat, right? And I see information about combat, and I can do this for other properties of the character. So how many do you have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 4, 5, 6. Instead of combat, all of them being combat. Durability, intelligence, power, speed, strength. Let's see whether I can get a no break space going. No, it's not displaying a space over there. It's just spans. I could do it in something else. I mean, I could go to app.css. I could take a look at add spans. I could add a right. I can add a margin of 5px pixel to every span, and so we have some spacing between these spans. Right. We have information about all of these superheroes. And so this is a very simple example of the use effect. Again, the use effect is used to implement side effects in React components. They can be triggered um, based on the monitoring of some data element or some component element, and so they have a dependency. You can also just make sure that they trigger once when the start of when the component is initially loaded. This concludes the demonstration of the use effect